Hello and welcome to the Tower Coffee Hour. This is Tyree, and in this segment we'll be reporting on the commission that looks over Mueller called PIAC, and they had a meeting on May 10th, and this is a full recording of that meeting. But once you get past the first two parts, the rest of it becomes just details and really dull. But the first part is pretty important because it talks about the finances of Mueller, and that's important for those of us who are going to live here after the contract is finished and we take over and are running it. So it's worth paying attention to that. Thanks for listening.
Good evening. This meeting of the Robert Mueller Municipal Airport Plan Implementation Advisory Commission is called to order at 6:04 p.m. We are meeting on Tuesday, May the 10th, 2022 at Austin Energy Headquarters, and some of us are meeting virtually online via IT resources provided by the City of Austin. Present are Commissioners Jones, Kravaniak, Rosinette, Hilliard virtually, Nider, Lukey, and Jackson. Commissioners, the first item on our agenda, of course, is public communication. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to discuss any issue related to the Mueller project, which is not on today's agenda. And we look forward to hearing Martin Jones of the Austin Film Society, who will be providing some testimony on his organization.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners. Marty Jones from the Austin Film Society, studio director. And just wanted to let you know to maybe spread through your network in the neighborhood that we're doing. One of our tenants is doing a controlled burn on Thursday and Friday night. So if they see smoke or flames, it is under the auspices of special effects and the fire marshal. But that'll be Thursday evening and maybe Friday evening. So I just thought I'd let people know, nothing to worry about. Just making fun pictures, otherwise things are going well. And thanks for your service. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for the heads up about this week.
Can I have one point of clarification on that?
Yes, Jay. Yes, Jay.
Sorry, I was just curious, when you say controlled burn, is that part of the filmmaking, something that's happening with the filmmaking? Or
It's for filmmaking, as far as scene,
okay.
yeah. So it's completely under the control of special effects and under the observation of the fire marshal.
I just wanted to make sure you communicated it.
Yes, with an approved permit and safety protocols as dictated by the Directors Guild of America and all the unions involved.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah,
Perfect,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Any other questions I should have asked?
Thank
Okay,
you.
great, thank you.
And we'll also note for the record, Commissioner Hyde has joined us. Glad to see you today.
Apologize for being late.
No problem. The next item on our agenda is an update on the POA Financial Sustainability Plan. This presentation is going to be provided by Catellas.
Good evening, Commissioners. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. My name is Brian dullllll for the record. I am, most of you know me as the Vice President of Mueller Marketing and Communications. Tonight I'm wearing an additional hat. I am also President of the Master Board of the Mueller Property Owners Association. So you may remember that in the past several months, the Mueller Commission tasked me with providing an overview of the POA's finances, especially as it relates to the transition from the current board, which is made up of developer representatives, to the future board, which will be made up of elected members of commercial and residential property owners. So while much of the business is directly associated with the POA itself and not the project, I'm happy to bring forward a high-level overview of the POA's finances. And I'm going to start with the, go to the next slide for the agenda. I'm going to start with an overview of the annual budget and that process. Then I'll address the longer term budget that we've been putting together. And then we'll address reserves, and I'll end with a quick overview of the Pavilion projections. Next slide. So one of the POA's primary efforts is to collect funds or assessments from the property owners to pay for all the expenses associated with maintaining Miller's common and shared properties. This annual budget starts with a review of the actual expenses from the previous year and in the current year, anticipated revenues, which is essentially when we think that homes or other businesses will come on board to the community. We also look at input from various committees, which includes currently our pool committee, the row home committee, the budget committee, landscaping, etc. And then we also look at a reserve study, which we will discuss here momentarily. And we look at some other factors as well to kind of put together that budget. It starts in the summer. Usually we kind of use the previous budget as a basis and start building from there. The budget committee has the opportunity to review in several drafts over the course of the summer and fall before it is ultimately approved by the master board. It is then shared by all the property owners at the annual meeting, which usually takes place in mid-November, and then it's posted online with written notice for property owners to be able to review that at their leisure. Throughout the years, next slide, I think. Throughout the years, the budget has become more, back one more slide. Thanks. The budget has become much more detailed than it was at the very beginning of the process in early days of Miller. Not only is the budget broken out into the master or the main budget, which essentially covers all of the common areas like landscaping and administrative functions, but there are also special service areas within the budget, such as pools, the garden courts, the row homes, and soon the cottage homes, which have a special service area that will be coming on board here shortly. And today I think we have over 200 different line items for that budget, and it'll probably continue to grow over time. And it's gotten even more detailed than that, because I'll just use a couple examples that's listed here. We at one point had, for example, the parks were, all the mulch associated with the trees, the common beds areas, etc. But over time, we decided that there was a special expense for the mulch for the playscapes. It's a special type of mulch. It happens at a specific time of year. It's a good checklist for us to make sure that we're doing that every year. So we made that a separate line item. And that's just every one of those items, as you might imagine, continues to multiply as we go forward. So again, the next slide. So that's what's done on an annual basis for our budget. And beyond that, the board opted to establish a long-term or build-out budget because we knew transition from the developer to the property owner board would happen at some point. So within the build-out budget, we've added columns for each year through 2026, which is beyond when we anticipate the master development agreement to be completed. And we did that because we wanted to show a future board, or the current transition committee, that over time, here's how everything shakes out as we understand it today. We have a number of placeholder amounts in there. We have a lot more row homes rows in our Excel spreadsheet than we did before, because there are expenses that we don't have now that we think we will incur in the future. For example, we have 3 more parks that haven't even been officially finally designed yet, but we do have placeholders in there for what we think it might cost to maintain them, simply based on the cost to maintain existing parks. We also anticipate we'll probably need some additional staff at some point, and so we put some money in there. We're not sure exactly what that staff will be. We've got a placeholder in there. We also have a placeholder in there for things, utilities. Right now we're assuming a 5 to 6% increase every year in the cost of utilities to maintain all just the irrigation of our parks for the water and for the electricity. It may not be 5%, 5 or 6%. We just don't know what Austin Energy and Austin Water Department will do. Right now, we're trying to be as conservative as possible in that budget, because right now we're in an inflation period, and if that continues, we want to be conservative with those numbers. If for some reason those numbers come back much lower, that's more money that we can spend on something else, such as adding more trees, adding more plants, putting money towards reserves for future needs, et cetera, et cetera. But we try to be very conservative with our calculations. And because there's so many unknowns and so many things that change between now and 2026, it's definitely a working draft, which we typically don't like to share publicly because of so many things can change. However, we intend to share this draft with the Mueller property owners this Friday with an article that'll be in our e-newsletter that'll provide some context for the budget, and then it'll be posted on what we have. It's an online app called Town Square that the Property Owners Association uses to then have these documents available for any property owner, whether commercial or residential, to take a look at, as I mentioned, at their convenience. Any questions on the budget before I move on to the next item, which is reserves?
Go ahead, yes, Ray.
This one, okay. Is it for certain that the MDA, I mean, I know it's written in there, it expires in December of 2024. I mean, whether you're done or not? You can tell us it's done, excuse me?
I'm not 100% familiar with how the MDA works. I do believe that there's an opportunity to be able to extend the MDA life if necessary, if there's particular projects that need to continue to be finalized. But we're using, I think currently we're still using December 2024 as the date of completion for now.
Brian? Hello, Brian?
Yes.
Yes, Corky.
Brian, hi, thank you. Brian, hi, it's Corky. I want to talk a minute about the irrigation costs for the water, because I know we collect groundwater and store it in the ponds and the tower to use for irrigation out here. So what is our financial arrangement with City of Austin Water about that? The fees for, what are we paying for in our fees for irrigation?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Hilliard, I'll have to get that information for you. I don't have that specific information in front of me. You may recall that we do use reclaimed water for our irrigation, which allows us to use a little more water when necessary. Of course, we're also using
Yes.
native and adaptive plants wherever possible, whether it's trees or bushes, shrubs, flowers, etc. So hopefully we're using a little bit less, same even with the type of grasses that we use. So hopefully we're using a little bit less than we would necessarily need, but I don't have the details as how it relates to Austin Water at this time, but I can get that information for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering whether you got a projection for an annual increase of 25%.
Well, our
irrigation.
projections are based on an increase from the previous year. And so our previous year is also projected from previous years, et cetera. So it goes back to any arrangements that were made.
It's a trend.
Yeah.
Historical information. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Move on to the next slide then, please. So many POAs or HOAs do not fund their reserves at 100% of the reserve study recommends. Hold on, sorry, I think I skipped a slide here. Forgive me just one moment. So I'll just talk a little quickly about the reserve study first. So the reserve study is meant to be a long-range planning tool to help POA or HOA staffs and boards really kind of anticipate what kind of long-range expenses we're going to have and then what that cost might be for those expenses over time. And they use a lot of various tools and systems to identify those costs at certainly a local or regional level. It's also meant to kind of prioritize and identify potential and schedule those particular projects over time. And you should know that as we did a reserve study last year for the Mueller project, we did ask the study authors, originally they were using a 2% inflation rate, but again, because of current inflation periods, we actually asked them to increase the inflation rate to 5% in order to kind of cover today's market. As I mentioned before, many POAs and HOAs do not fund their reserves at 100% of their reserve study recommendations. And a lot of that has to do with the fact of timing of things. The reserve study is kind of a snapshot, and it'll kind of say that, hey, we think that, for example, a sidewalk that may or may not be, owned by the POA, is going to need to be repaired in 7 years, but actually it lasts for 10 years. So you don't necessarily have to have that all funded. And they also assume that everything's going to kind of break in a particular time, or everything's going to be fixed at a particular time, when in fact, not everything does have to be fixed at any given time. And then frankly, the other reason that a lot of the HOAs do not fund the 100% is because of the cost to do so. I mean, there's a cost to every homeowner, every property owner to cover those reserves. And sometimes it's difficult to put that burden on the homeowners when the board says, okay, now we need you to pay more. So we have tried, you'll see here in just a moment, we have fully funded the master reserves. We still need to fund more of the row home reserves, and we're working on that. So next slide.
Hey, Ron. I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Do you have, and you may cover this in a moment, I apologize, but do you have a percentage that your target is for those reserve studies, that fund, the funding of those? Is there a, are you looking to, instead of the 100%, what is your target?
That is a good question, and I appreciate that. Our target actually is still 100%. The board wants both the master and the row home reserves to be fully funded, even though if not all of them do. We want to leave this community when the developer is done and we are no longer the board. Whoever is the board, made up of, again, commercial and residential property owners, we want them to be in good financial stead. So, and I'll talk about that, how we get there in just a second.
Thank you.
So just a reminder for the master reserves, they're used for large-scale projects such as pool pumps, pond pumps, really kind of big ticket items. They could be, to repair the public art that we have, the playscapes. They could even be used to replace trees that died in the winter storm. And on the row home side, they can be used for exterior painting, other exterior repairs, and in the case, we obviously have a hailstorm and we have some roofs to repair from an insurance standpoint that we're currently working on. But in the instance of if there wasn't a hailstorm and roofs still needed to be repaired, just because of the life of the project, reserves are meant to cover those type of expenses. Historically, however, the POA has made a lot of these repairs, especially to the common areas, using operating funds, which is how we've been able to build up the reserve budget. We've had the money available to repair a bench, replace some of the trees, add enhancements, et cetera, without having to dip into reserves. On the row home side, we obviously have some work to do there. So just to kind of put a fine point on it, the Master Reserve Fund is predicted by the end of this year to have a surplus of about $760,000, which is a huge number for us to be able to use towards a number of things when they need to be fixed over time. However, on the row home side, we do have a deficit of about $460,000. And that's for a couple of reasons. One reason is 40% of all of the row homes that we have in Miller are part of the Affordable Homes Program. And the board has chosen over the years to not increase the assessments too high in order to make that challenging, more challenging for affordable homeowners to be able to pay that assessment rate. Additionally, we have used some money in the past couple of years that normally would have gone to the reserve fund to actually do some of the reserve work. So for example, I think it was the past 2 years we spent about $200,000 actually painting the exteriors of the very first row homes that were built. And as part of that exterior work, we also fixed some wood trim. There was some wood that was rotting around some of the windows, and some other, some gutter repairs and things like that normally would have been reserve expenses. We went ahead and, as we refer to as preventative maintenance, and got those done. We'll continue to be able to do that this year with a smaller amount of budget, but still a significant amount to do the next set of row homes that are in need of that painting or that repair work. And then the last item on that, obviously we know that we need to play catch up with that $460,000. So we're exploring with the city utilizing some project funds to cover those row home reserve deficits. We don't have any details on that yet. We're just kind of exploring those options right now, and hopefully we'll have some information in the next few months to a year to kind of, we have a little bit of time still to figure that out. Any questions on the reserves?
Yes, Rick, you have a question?
Yeah, that seems a little odd to me, project funds covering maintenance, but, or, oh, yes. And the other thing, when you're referring to the row homes, and I'm just not familiar enough with how all of these individually owned units that may be in like a Mueller home, don't they have the same sort of situation where the exterior stuff is done by, are you using row home to refer to any kind of group shared property, shared wall kind of thing, or are there other things like Mueller homes or?
It's a good question. So any of the what we call kind of the traditional row homes that are attached, plus the shop homes, are part of the row home association. However, the Miller houses are essentially their own condo association. There are actually two condo associations to represent the two sets of Miller houses along Simon Avenue. And then every other condo project, whether it's Greenway Lofts over by Ascension, the Pearlstone over by, they'll also have their own condo associations, so they're not part of what I'm talking about here today.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, that last one.
I have a question.
We want to hear more.
I have a question.
Yes,
I have a
Courtney.
question. Hi, Brian. I'm sort of stunned by the amount of the deficit here. I mean, I'm trying to think about, I mean, I know that there were a number of houses that needed to be repaired, the row houses, but is your projection for repair and maintenance out of whack? I mean, for example, my house that I own, of course I'm in a home here, I've been here 14 years. I've already had twice now to replace my roof due to hail damage. And it looks like that's going to be even more apparent in the future. But it seems like somehow the predictor on this need for extraordinary repair may not be sufficient. I mean, obviously it's not sufficient. If we've got $500,000 there almost in deficit. So I've heard all the conversation in the neighborhood about this from the homeowners, or the rural homeowners, and their unhappiness about this. But I'm wondering about how we were caught with our pants down on this deal.
I wish I had an answer for you, Commissioner Hilliard. I don't, unfortunately. It's something that the board has been aware of for a little bit of time. We know that it's an issue that we have to address, but I can't tell you, anything more than that, unfortunately, at this time.
Yeah, and just a follow-up. I was trying to remember the last time we heard a financial review of the POA, HOA finances, and I just don't recall the last time that this overview was given to the commission. Do you happen to recall when that was?
I'm not aware of an overview ever being provided, because normally this is kind of a function for POA is it's done within the POA, not as a project or city purpose.
Yeah, because it was sort of like, I couldn't remember one of those either. So I guess the question is, why now? Is it because of the impact on potential city funds to fund this deficit? Is that why you're bringing this to us?
Well, you may recall, Commissioner,
We haven't heard before.
there was a presentation or a request that was made by a property owner, and he's here today, several months ago, and then from that conversation, the commission asked us to give a report according to this. This is a follow-up.
Thank you for refreshing my memory. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, Brian, do you know just kind of roughly how many individual units sit in the row home reserve fund?
I think we have about 800 units currently, maybe a little over 800 at the moment, and a few more to come over time.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Jason?
So what is the amount that people pay in the assessment? So for each of these 800 row homes, like what's the amount per month or per year that they're paying approximately?
It's on a monthly basis. For the master, it is $43 I think a month. It's $12 now for the pool. The garden, I can't remember what the garden courts pay, and then the row homes are paying, I want to say $275 per month. That includes, I believe, the master and the pool, but also includes a special assessment we put in there to cover the deductible associated with the insurance claim for the hailstorm that we had last year.
And it seems like this should have been anticipated that 40% of the row homes are on the Affordable Homes Program. That doesn't seem like a very good reason to keep the dues artificially low. It seems like we should have known that going in and done some sort of projection or something. So is this being kept low? So when the board makes this decision, is it row homeowners coming in and saying, I can't pay more than this, keep our dues low? Or is this something the board is just kind of doing unprompted? Or do you have any insight into that? Or how, you know, it just seems like an unforced error here from where I sit.
I think it's a combination of both. We do get requests during the budget season from affordable homeowners, either directly to the POA or through the Mueller Foundation, to keep the assessments as low as possible, not just on the row homes, but also on the yard homes. But of course, the yard home expenses aren't nearly as significant as the row home expenses. And it's also something the board has just been conscious of over the years. I think it's a combination of the two.
One more question?
Yes, Corky, you have a question?
I do. Just a follow-up here. So, Brian, I'm just trying to get the numbers straight here. So for the row homes, you said it's $275 monthly, more or less, for their fee, plus a special assessment for the deductible. What's the amount of that special? Is that a one-time or a monthly or?
The special assessment is combined in with that 275.
Okay.
And that's over the course of the next 3 years. I can't remember how much of it is on a monthly basis, but we decided because the deductible was so significant that we would put that over a 3-year period. So
over a period of time.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be as challenging for some homeowners to pay it over a year.
Sure. So if we pulled the special assessment out of the 275, what would the monthly? I mean, I'm just wondering what the amount of that special assessment is.
I should have that information. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. I'll have to get that for you. It's
Okay.
easy to get. I should have
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Ken, you have a question?
Hey, Brian, just curious, did you guys, I'm looking at that expense, the 460 as a deficit. Have you guys gone back as a POA and tried to look at what's driving that expense? I mean, is it material faulty construction? Are you going to see an ongoing issue in other units?
Well, just to remind you, Commissioner Rosenthal, that $460,000 is a deficit, not necessarily what the expenses are. So the $460 is based on what the reserve study says that we should be spending over a particular period of time. It doesn't mean that we actually will spend that much. It's just recommending that we have that that much in the account, or $460,000 more than we have currently in the account.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Yes, Jason, you have a question?
And so what is in the account? So 460, that's the deficit. What's in the account currently?
I'll have to get that information for you. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. I mean, well, is there, $500,000 in there, so we're 50% short? I mean, do you have any idea of what kind of percentage we're looking at here?
I don't. I'm afraid that if I gave you a number, I'd be completely off. There's a couple of numbers that are floating in my head, and I'm afraid if I shared that with you today, I would be really wrong. So I can tomorrow be able to follow up with you on that. I just don't know it today.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, I was kind of echoing Rick's thoughts earlier about the idea of the project funds going to make up the deficit here. I can't, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around like that, what that relationship looks like. I mean, I suppose I could, I live in Mueller House. I know that our reserves aren't fully met, I'm trying to imagine is this like a special relationship because it's, I don't know, it's just kind of hard. I don't know that I can articulate why one association versus say another association would get sort of special treatment versus, in our case, I think we're going to probably, maybe we might have to do a special assessment, we're probably going to have to raise our fees, all these things that we normally do, that I'm pretty certain the project funds aren't going to come in and help us out. And so, anyways, it's just, I don't have, I guess it's more of a comment, I just can't fully wrap my head around the thought there.
I will add that as part of the build-out budget for the row homes, we do anticipate having to increase some assessments over time to also, it's not just a matter of just the project paying for it, the row home owners will also have to contribute more to the row home reserves over time as well.
Yes, Martin, you have a question?
How many row homes are set to be built in the future?
I don't know the answer to that question yet either. Obviously, I would say we're probably looking at, I'm making a wild guess here, 100, 150 more row homes to be built in the, well, that probably even less than that. We have 371 total homes being built in Section 11. I don't know what percentage of them are row homes. It would be hard for me to believe that a third of them would be row homes. So I'm going to guess probably between 50 and 100 more row homes.
Yes, Jason, you have a question?
Yes, and I should probably know the answer to this, but why are we only talking about master and row home reserves here? It sounds like there's a lot of other associations. Is that beyond your scope, or help me to understand that if you would?
Correct. The condo associations that I referred to earlier, whether they're Miller House or, for example, the Pearlstone condos, that they help collect the assessment for the POA, for the master POA, but we don't do any expenses for that, so therefore we don't collect any money for their particular projects. Does that make sense? So they're helping us collect for the master to pay for the parks and things like that, but we are not involved with them at all in terms of making any repairs or expenses to that condo project.
And so just follow up on that. So what makes the row home reserve fund different in that way? It's just you have responsibilities there that was part of the agreement or something going forward? Or?
Yes, and there are different expenses associated with the row homes versus the master reserves. So as I mentioned before, the master is really kind of for the common areas, the parks, etc. And the row homes have different types of expenses and more of them because the exterior building, whether it's a roof or a siding of a home, is ultimately going to be more expensive than replacing a few trees here or there. So that's why we separate the two out accordingly.
And before we go on to the rest of the person, Brian, I did want to clarify one thing. I'm very confident that at least some of the row homeowners are paying $331 a month for their monthly HOA fee.
Thank you. That may be actually correct. I will get the correct number for everyone. And
I don't know if that's all of them, but at least some of them.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for correcting that. So that 331 or that 330, I think 275 may be everything. Well, maybe the row home portion, and the remainder would then be the master and the pool that they're also paying into.
Commissioners, other questions before he moves on? Okay, good.
Next slide then, please. So I'll just briefly touch base on the Branch Park Pavilion. As you know, that opened in mid-2021 during the pandemic. We had a lot of event inquiries as soon as the space opened, but we hardly had any bookings because we were still facing the pandemic As a result, the Miller team has chosen not to transfer the ownership of the pavilion to the POA yet. So any expenses that we are incurring for the pavilion is going through the project, as opposed to going through the POA. We didn't feel that was fair to put those expense burdens on the POA. Although the expenses are relatively minor, and we think that by the end of 2022 we will break even, or maybe even have a little bit of extra revenue associated with it, even though our projections are, again, very conservative in terms of the expenses as well as the projections in revenue. So in April, for example, we did a couple of events that were significant. I think about $30,000 came in between just 2 events, which is great. We have, I think, 4 or 5 events scheduled in May, and I think even that many more scheduled as we go forward from there. But based on the number of inquiries and bookings that we are receiving today, and the fact that we're in kind of a post-pandemic period, knock on wood, we anticipate the POA, when we do transfer it over to the POA, will have a net profit of at least $100,000, probably even more, in 2023, and that number will continue to grow as we go forward. So that's money that can be used towards any number of special projects that haven't even been identified yet for the POA going forward.
Brian, I just had one question or something I wanted to clarify, and it's when the pavilion was first built, and hopefully I'm not confusing it with something else. I thought at one point there was some question about whether the pavilion would be transferred to either the PLA or the city. And so it sounds like definitely at some point it will go to the POA. And what was the rationale for making the transfer to the POA instead of the city loss?
Well, it's not 100% confirmed yet. Thank you for that clarification. This is just me speculating. I think we're about 90%, I'm 90% positive that it will transfer over to the POA as opposed to serving as a city function. But that hasn't been 100% decided, so I appreciate that question. And I can't speak to the exact rationale of why it was decided for POA versus the city or project funding, but I think the idea is that this is a revenue booster that can support some of the POA functions as necessary over time.
Yes, Martin, you have a question.
Considering this particular line of thought here, is there now money being reserved for doing future repairs of this building?
Yes. In fact, I didn't bring the expense report with me, but the line items for that include everything from the professional service that is required to handle all the bookings for at the event, and making sure that the professional shows up for the site visits and opens the doors for the people to get into the setup and everything. It includes all the cleaning. It includes some repair costs that we just anticipate that at some point a garage door isn't going to function properly and needs to be repaired. It includes insurance. It also includes a reserve fund specifically for the pavilion.
So can I?
Yes, Rick, you have a question.
Brian, is there a dedicated staff for this facility at this point, or who's running it?
Currently, we have a company named Bounce, which manages really all of the events that take place in Miller, including the pavilion, as well as the events that the requests that take place, whether it's in the hangar or in our various parks. We get hundreds of requests every month for everything from small birthday parties to big citywide functions. So there's a lot of coordination that goes along with that. In addition to that, there's 2 people, a part of our marketing team, that helps in reviewing those, and then we'll give constructive feedback or provide a few details here and there. In time, we anticipate that event function will be something that the POA will have to take on, and that board and that we're also looking at creating an events committee for the POA that will start as early as this year and start to kind of shadow the marketing team, so that they know why we establish policies the way we have, and why we decline some events and we accept some events based on what we think the condition of the parks are going to be, or making sure that the public still has access to the parks even if an event is going on, that sort of thing. So in time, we anticipate not only an events committee, but we've also, as part of that build-out budget, identified one of the staff resources to be a full-time events person that would take this on. And that events person could be hired directly by the POA or could be Balance or some other event management company over time. That'll be determined in the future.
Question?
Yes, Corky, you have a question?
So Brian, I mean, to follow our prior conversation, are the monies being collected for reserves for the pavilion adequate to cover things like deductibles in case of major damage, either from hail or fire, etc.? I mean, I'm just sort of thinking about the track record here.
If you're asking, are we collecting the correct
Adequate
fees?
reserves.
Yes,
Adequate reserves, yes.
yes, we are building up the reserves for the pavilion with the fees that we are charging for renting the space.
Are they adequate fees in order to take care of a deductible in case of some kind of major damage?
Yes.
Okay. And one other question is a tangent question, but so what about the hangar? I mean, what's happened to that property? Because this pavilion, it didn't replace, well, it did. I mean, it pulled some functions away from that area. Is that still city property, and is it still up for a projected use?
Yes, yes, and yes. The hangar remains a City of Austin property that is managed by Catalyst on behalf of the city for events currently. We do have some events that take place there. We probably still have a few more that will take place this year. There is still interest from various parties to redevelop the hangar, but still using the structure of the hangar, but nothing to report at this time.
And so how about, sorry.
I was just going to remind the commission of something we shared over the years, that the idea is the hangar will be used for some commercial purpose at some point in the future. We're just not sure exactly what or when that will take place yet.
I'm sorry, one more question. So is our reserves being collected of the City of Austin property? So I guess any reserves would be the responsibility of the city, correct? In case of damage to the hangar?
Correct, but we do collect fees and deposits from every event that take place in either the hangar or the pavilion to cover some of those expenses as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions on the pavilion? Let's move to the last slide. And that's just kind of an update on next steps. So every year we do present our financials to an auditor to review everything and give us what has been a clean report by the audit every year. So the 2021 financials are currently with the auditor now, and so as soon as the audit is complete, we will post those on our the POA Town Square app, just like we always have. As I mentioned, we will be publishing the build-out budget this week to the POA members, and then as soon as some of our friends at the city have a chance to review the reserve study and the Q&A, we will get that posted, and then soon after the pro forma for the pavilion. We're also, some of you may not be aware that we have hired a community manager, a new community manager. His name is Joe Restuccia. He comes to us from Steiner Ranch, and before that in Houston, Cinco Ranch and First Colony area, where all those were very large communities. In some cases they had developer boards, in some cases they had property owner boards, in some cases they were transitioning between the two. So he has familiarity with all three types of boards, knows how to work on big budgets for big communities, lots of landscaping, pools, everything that we experience here at Miller. So he has officially joined the organization. He is working remotely through this week and will be on board going forward. So he's still trying to get up to speed. There's obviously, this community is a very complicated, complex community, so it's taking a little time to do so, but one of his big focuses is on the financials. He's just had a chance to review the Q1 financials, for example, for this year, and just shared those with the board this evening. So he's already got his, he's already sprinting ahead. So we're getting him up to speed. And then we'll start developing the 2023 budget based on the build-out budget and last year's budget. We will do the same engagement we previously have with various committees, with the POA, with the budget committee, before it's reviewed and approved by the board. And then at some point, I'd say probably 6 to 12 months, it may take a little bit longer than that, transfer the pavilion ownership, again, assuming so, but ideally to the POA. So we have a lot of action items to do.
Rick, you have a question?
Yes, so the new community manager, is this a new position or was there a previous community manager?
There was a previous community manager who's no longer,
Who was that?
her name was Patty Toms.
Okay, so I'm trying, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Corky, you have a question?
So, Brian, going back to the first conversation about the reserve deficit and row houses. So who are we asking, what fund are we asking to supply the monies for this reserve deficit? Is it a city fund? Are we asking them for $460 million? I mean, this is an embarrassment, and it's also, well, it's an embarrassment, and it's also cause for some conversations with our council members, because I'm sure if it's a city fund, we're going to have to be consulting with them about this. So what's the plan right now? Is it $640 million? Is that what you're requesting? And from what fund or what part of the city monies?
We haven't specifically requested anything yet from the city, so I can't speak to the exact process on that. That's something that will be determined by a number of people, probably at Catellus, and I may be a part of that conversation, but probably others involved with other staff members, so I can't speak to the details of that yet right now. I'm sorry.
But you will be asking the city to come forward with funds to supplant this deficit.
Yes.
Is that the plan?
Yes.
The whole the whole 460,000?
I don't know if we'll be doing the full amount yet, Commissioner Duggar.
So are we involved in any more discussion about this, or is this a briefing, just FYI for us?
I believe this is just more of an FYI briefing at this point.
Michael, if I could also...
Thank you.
Yes, Joe, you have a clarification?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not on microphone right now. I'll share Summer's microphone. I just want
Sorry, I can't hear her.
Yeah, I'm coming to the microphone for Chris. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Hi,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Jill Fagan, Economic Development, just for the record as well. I just wanted to clarify, Corky, your question as well. So this conversation and the presentation this evening was in response to an agenda item request from the commission to Catellus.
Right.
Brian, in his role as the Property Owners Association president, is providing the update. And there has been just a very preliminary conversation with city staff about this, but there's been, no decisions made about it, and it's definitely a conversation, and I think everyone is cognizant of, a lot of the questions that have been raised here tonight, as well as, roles and responsibilities of the POA, of the master board and whatnot. So I just wanted to say for the record that I think that this is more informational, but not necessarily like a decision-making process or something that is like a definitive item.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you, Jill, for that. It's just in the larger picture. We'll all, as members, we'll have discussion responsibilities with our appointing council members, I'm sure, as this goes forward, particularly in this amount of money. So I'm trying to figure out what our roles and responsibilities are here, but I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
And we're more than happy to have conversations with you before you have those conversations with any council members.
Thank you.
Jason, you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that, my concern is how big a percent we're down here, this 460,000. And if my math checks out, if there's 800 row houses, that's like $575 per row house. So this isn't something that can't, I don't know what the financial position, people are in, but it's something that, shouldn't be insurmountable if we, get ahead of the curve here and identify as a problem. And, $575 over a year or something is not, well, I don't know, shouldn't be too high of a mountain to climb here. So.
Commissioners, any other questions? I had a couple of follow-up questions, I think more related to the city of Austin. One, and I know this is preliminary, no final decisions have been made, but would the TIF fund be a potential source of funding to help cover some of the reserve issues that a city contribution could be funded from?
I'm not an expert on that, but I would assume that that's certainly one that would be explored.
And the other question, and I'm not sure if this is a POA question or a City of Austin question. I know at some point the greenways are going to be deeded over to the city. Has any final decision been made in terms of what contribution the city would make to the POA to cover maintenance on parks, particularly the greenways, but I don't know if there's any funding that the city helps provide to help support the other parks at Miller, since they're all open to the public?
To answer your question, the city does provide some funding to support specifically the greenways or the perimeter parks, the northwest, southwest, and southeast greenways, not the other parks of Miller, so not Lake Park, not Branch Park, et cetera, et cetera. There's discussions being had about, and we're in the process as a POA trying to calculate the cost for and separate out some of the costs for those greenways to provide that to the city to determine what that future contribution might be.
Commissioners, other questions? Yes, Rick, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, so what other sources of funding besides the TIF would there be?
Since it's preliminary, I don't know what the answers to that would be.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, maybe I'll try to be more articulate this time around. Can you, and maybe, I don't know if you've thought through this, but if somebody could kind of step me through the rationale of why the row home, what relationship about the row home and project funds, like how those two things are linked in such a way that there would be a consideration to make. I'm really having a hard time making the linkage, and maybe somebody else can, maybe I'm just missing it, but maybe somebody else can kind of try to create the linkage for me about that relationship and why there might be a linkage there.
I'd have to probably think through that, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you later on. I just can't articulate it probably at this particular moment.
Commissioners, other questions for Brian on this topic? Great. Thank you very much. It's a very enlightening presentation. Obviously, there's lots of interest. I'm sure there will continue to be. Oh. Thank you. Yes, Joe Freeland, be providing up to 3 minutes of testimony on this topic.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm probably the one responsible for this lengthy thing because I raised this question back, I don't know, was it December, January this year? And we've had some meetings with Catalyst in the interim, and you saw Brian's presentation tonight. And, you know, I think at the time I came in here, we were in a steep nosedive. And I think now I get the sense that maybe somebody's got their hands on the wheel and trying to pull that plane out of the dive. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, and there's still a bunch of unknowns. And I've had this discussion with Jill. I think it's this commission's sort of purview, because I'm afraid that the row home deficits and the row home costs are going to pull the master funds away from the parks and the other sort of public amenities, because that's what the master is supposed to be funding, are those public amenities and not the row homes. And it's sort of, how did we get here? I heard that question. We got here because in the past, the master revenues, the master assessments were subsidizing row homes because the accounting was so bad, nobody knew that that's what was going on. So Catalyst stepped in a few years ago, started cleaning up the accounting cleaning up, suddenly revealed, oh yeah, master has been subsidizing row homes for a long time. And in fact, you know, you saw the $500,000 deficit. Well, what that $500,000 is that's what the shortage on reserve funding today. That's not the deficits that have been year over year been sort of racking up. I think over the last 3 years, row homes have been running at about a $500,000 deficit a year, maybe more. And where that money's been coming from, that's the question I keep asking. The only place that money could be coming from is from excess revenues on the master side. So right now, master is still subsidizing row homes. Why are row homes special as opposed to the Mueller homes? Because there was a decision Catellus made long ago that row homes would be a service area of the master association. So as a service area of the master association, they're sort of a little subpart of the master community, not a separate entity like the Mueller homes. And so sort of that decision, then the change in the insurance in 2018, the omnibus, there's certainly a lot of costs on the row home side that I don't think were really thought out in advance. And so we just sort of plummeted off into this hole. Now, do I think we fully sort of accounted for all the costs yet? I don't think so. I think we're getting closer to it, but there are still issues out there with regard to costs, particularly insurance-related repair costs. My 3 minutes up, Joe.
Yes, if you can just yes, if you just finish your thought, yeah.
Yeah, so that was sort of where we got to. I think we're making progress, and I appreciate the commission sort of weighing in on this. Thank you.
Can I ask him a question?
Well, he's not testifying, but if you want to answer a question, yeah, go ahead. If it's okay with you, Jim.
Yeah, it's fine.
You don't have to, but yeah, go ahead.
So, in your estimation, what's the answer here? It seems like you've thought a lot about this. What's the answer?
Well, I mean, one answer is, and I think we're seeing that with the raising of the row home assessments. You know, that will get us out of the dive. That's sort of what do we do about the past. You know, that's an issue which is going to be touchy to raise internally. I'm not sure that that's really a commission issue, but I think there's a couple $1 million out there that has been sort of funneled over to row homes without full transparency on that. Now, do we want to provide that transparency, or do we want to just keep that hidden? I mean, that's one of those things we're going to have to address.
Well, I'm talking about more. I mean, you know, we can talk about the past, and that's certainly relevant here. But you know, going forward, like, what's the, you know, if we were to talk to our council members, or you know, I don't know who we talk to about this. Honestly, I'm still getting my feet under me. But you know, if we're trying to work out the solution to fix the issue as you see it now going forward, what does that fix look like? Is there a way to separate the row home POA out to make it a separate entity like these others, or you know, how do we prevent this from continuing to be an issue in your mind?
Well, I think we just need to get a full grasp on the expenses on the row home side, and then make sure that the assessments are high enough to cover that. Then that raises this issue about the affordability. You know, we get a lot of affordable on that side now. That, you know, Mike, you raised that question about 330 versus 275. The 275 was the average, and you know, it was last year that the master finally decided to make tiered assessments on the row home side. So the bigger row homes now pay more, and the smaller row homes pay less, which is a way to sort of address affordability. The Mueller homes have always done that. They have always treated the affordables as a sort of separate class for assessment purposes. But that's something we're going to have to figure out. We're going to have to find perhaps another source of revenue to sort of offset those increased costs for the affordable participants, or at least those who still need that help. And yeah, I really think we just need to get a firm grasp on what those costs are going forward. And you know, and we've been working with Brian, and he's been swamped. And you know, I think we're gonna get there, but you know, we may be surprised with what we see.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering the question.
And thank you, Joe, for recommending this topic, and also for your testimony on this. And I have a feeling we'll be following up again, so we appreciate you taking time. All right. The next, sir. Yes, the next item on our agenda is the monthly Miller Development Update.
Hello again, Commissioners. Brian DeLiesel, Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Miller. This is probably going to be the quickest development update because I don't really have one today. This is, I know, a rarity. I usually have something to present, but I've racked my brains the past couple weeks trying to come up with something in terms of new parks, new retail, new office, etc. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot of building going on, but there's nothing that's really new. So I'll just take this opportunity to answer any questions you might have. And here we go.
We'll start with Martin first, followed by Dave.
Thank you. I was curious about the skate park.
We believe the skate park and the Southeast Greenway will open sometime this fall. We don't have an exact date for it though, but that's that's the latest thing. I just heard that today.
Dave?
Yeah, I don't know if Preston's kind enough to record this. A lot of people might be dialed in, I don't know. But could you just quickly do a recap? You came back to the podium as somebody different and sort of who you're representing previously and who you're representing now when you're talking about developmental update, because I feel like it's an important differentiation.
Sure.
Even though you're the same guy, you have different roles.
Understood. So the previous presentation, I was representing the Property Owners Association. I am the president of the Master Board. I also serve as the president of the Mixed Use Board and the vice president of the Commercial Board, the ECTC Board. Currently, I'm wearing the hat as vice president of marketing for the Miller Marketing Communications on behalf of Catellus.
Commissioners?
Question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Corky.
Brian, thank you for that. I'm trying to catch myself up here. Is the hotel open, fully open with all the restaurants and stuff?
No, we anticipate the hotel will probably open now in mid-June, as well as the restaurant Blue Lacy. I haven't seen their menu yet for it. I understand it's going to be something pretty special, but I think the restaurant and the hotel is supposed to open in mid-June at this point.
Is the Tiny Boxwoods place open, the milk and cookies?
No, that'll open later, and it's not Tiny Boxwoods, it's Tiny's Milk and Cookies, so it will only have the bakery side of things. It will not have the Boxwoods or the lunch kind of menu that the West Austin location has.
And the tenant that goes into where the chicken place was?
That is Veracruz All Natural.
Yeah,
they are under construction. But for any of the tenants, either in the Diamond Building or in the we refer to as the Alpha Building, where Texas Teachers Retirement System is going to go, I don't have dates for the openings of any of those establishments. Most of them are working through their construction and their build out right now, but they haven't provided us dates for openings yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, other questions for Brian on the development update?
Hopefully I'll have more next month.
Oh, did anyone sign up to testify on this topic?
No.
Brian, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioners, the next item on our agenda is basically, it's listed as possible action, but I'm assuming at least at this meeting it will be a discussion item. This is our annual work session to discuss content for our 2021 annual report to City Council. As a reminder, it covers the period from last June up through the end of this month. And as just a kind of a quick reminder of what we included in last year's report, and somewhat interesting given in light of things that we were worried about and concerned about just 12 months ago. But in last year's report, we reported among our highlights, which of course goes back into 2020, we of course included updates on the TIF finance report, since we've been talking about finances and how strong the project is and how the revenue far exceeds the annual debt service. We discussed the Miller Foundation and questions about long-term sustainability of that program. At that last year, we were still discussing property transfer issues for the AISD Middle School. the site plan with the control tower, which some of you know has made quite a bit of progress because there's now construction on that site. We were then talking about the plans for the Southeast Greenway, which is, as you heard, is nearing completion. We talked about housing diversity by design is one way to help somewhat keep prices down or at least slow the increase. And we also last year had an update on the East 51st Street Mobility Project. For our goals for that year, from that year's report, we wanted to overall make sure that we could do all we could to make sure that the project was aligning with the master plan and the guiding principles. We were going to be looking for updates on the tower and the hangar, looking at outreach to women and minority-owned business enterprises, various transportation updates, including, of course, I-35, Airport Boulevard, updates on affordability by housing type, possible shared use facilities around the middle school, mainly that 10 acres that's actually not being used for the school itself. And we also started to talk about shifting our focus to transition issues, and some of the things we've discussed this evening kind of reinforce the need to place a laser focus on what issues are going to be facing the project, which ones are going to be the city's responsibility, as well as the POA and other organizations. And so that kind of was an overview of what we discussed in last year's report. Ironically enough, it's hard to believe it now, but last year we were still a little concerned about whether or not the economic downturn caused by the pandemic was having a negative effect. If it did, apparently it seems to be over, at least for those businesses that survived. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is open up the floor for discussions about what our focus should be for the next 12 months. And hopefully you've all saw the email I sent you earlier this week. This because of the timing, this annual report and the next one will be, although you can always, of course, provide feedback to the council member who appointed you on at any time. But this report and the next report will be two of our last opportunities to provide feedback directly to City Council on the status of this project, on whether it's meeting the objectives that the city set out, as well as it's meeting the vision of the community leaders here in East Austin who helped push to get this commission created, and more importantly, who pushed to get this project underway. So I'm going to start out by asking for suggestions, thoughts about issues we should be covering in our, it's called the 2021 report, but it actually obviously includes part of this year. Yes, Ken?
I think we need to continue with the transition discussions amongst the members and present eventually, I'd say hopefully within 6 to 7 months, our concerns and our opportunities.
Commissioners, other suggestions about topics we should be focusing on?
I have a few.
Okay, go ahead, Corky, and then Chris.
I'm going to echo, I think tonight's discussion highlights what one of my big concerns would be, and that it's in the transition that we have assurances are made, be sure the provisions are made to provide for secure funding and governance for Miller in the future. I think that has always been on the horizon, but I think the kinds of questions we've had this evening really highlight the need to get that lined up. Others are really, one, of course, are the transportation issues, to be sure of the connectivity of Miller, both on, for all kinds of transportation, which of course would be Project Connect as well as the I-35 corridor issues. And we have some work to do there, I think, because there's economic viability and also services to our residents. And it kind of dawned on me that if we go back to the 6 goals that were part of the vision for Miller, we could maybe organize around that to see what kind of progress we've made against goals. I think some of those we have really had exceptional progress, and there's some that we have not. And it might be a pretty good assessment of how we've done against those goals, might give us some more information about what might we want to put in that annual report.
Chris, you had a suggestion?
Yeah, I think there's we're in such a dire time right now in terms of housing affordability and just a lack thereof here in Austin. And I think, looking back looking into the past, decade to 2 decades, this development, this community has tried a series of different mechanisms, some that have been rather successful. I wonder, based on the current land that's still available, when I think about the site, there's still a lot of land that is in the kind of higher density zones of the master plan, and I wonder if there's the ability to challenge even further progressive, whether it's market rate or alternative means of affordable housing. I'm thinking along the lines of how, for instance, how a family in Tokyo or in Japan lives. Do we look in more micro-unit housing that is multi-bedroom? But to Corky's point about some of the core goals of the vision of Miller, that seems like one that on this sort of last chapter or chapters of development, that this community could hopefully be another sort of North Star for the larger metropolitan area.
Yes, Mark.
Following that line, thank you, Chris. That's a great idea. I would like to point out that the majority of the affordable housing that exists here is 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, and any family that exists really needs 3 bedrooms, and that we need to look at having more of that as affordable housing. In my opinion, the majority of it should be that, and that's where you're going to find the best service for, I think, the community at large.
Commissioners, other suggestions? Go ahead, Rick, you have a suggestion.
Corky mentioned that we should organize it around the goals, and that's the way it's been done for the past several years anyway. So I think that's a good way to continue on. Michael has been gracious enough to do the sort of where we are, what we did this past year, kind of a part of it, and I've tried my best with a lot of input from you all on what our goals would be for the coming year. Commissioner Sokola called me today and offered, I'm so grateful to help with that part of it. So she is going to, I think, sort of look at some of the transition end of it as well. So, but she's not going to handle it all by herself. Everybody can chip in and or talk with her and suggest things. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I agree, the transition is a biggie right now, and affordability and how you increase that in this town is a real challenge right now. So.
Other suggestions? Okay, let me throw out a couple more, and one of them ties back into affordability. I love the suggestion of getting more creative, and that's been some of the direction the project's gone, is in terms of, with the little land that's left, is finding more opportunities to provide affordable housing. And I think with affordability, we almost have to break it up into different pieces. There is opportunities for additional housing, but there's also opportunities to look at how the affordable program, both for apartments and also for homes are they working as intended? And who's being served by them, and digging a little deeper into that. And I think we often have these really wonderful presentations every year on affordability, and we try to cover everything all at one time. And I think going forward, we probably need to break that up into smaller pieces to see, are the people that were supposed to be served by this program, the police officer, the firefighter, the school teacher, who wants to actually live in Austin because they work here, is this actually serving them, or are there ways to improve it? And also, related to that, what are lessons we've learned? Because this project was started, in the latter part of now we're talking 2 decades ago. And what lessons have we learned? And some of you, I think I sent you some articles recently about efforts the city is making. There was another one today about the Habitat for Humanity going to help build some housing for school teachers in this same part of East Austin. And looking at when the program was developed, the laws were a little different than they are now, and they chose one approach, and it seems to be working. There are now some other options. And so in addition to looking at who's being served, let's also look at, especially as we're getting closer to the end of this project, what lessons can be learned from this that could be hopefully replicated in other parts of the city as Austin continues to look for ways perhaps to use other city-owned land to not maybe, you're not going to find 700 acres all in one place, but maybe you find an acre or two that could be developed, and what's the most efficient way to do that. And yeah, I think that's a breaking up the affordability issue is probably something that I think would make the best use of our time. Other suggestions?
A comment, Mike?
Yes, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Corky.
Just a comment, because I was sort of thinking about the comments just now about affordability and about out here. The only 2 significant parts of undeveloped land so far are the UT property and the surface parking in the retail area that's added, so that there can be building on that. I know we've got 13 acres at the UT section, and I'm not quite sure what the size of the area is. And of course, I understand that that's under the aegis of the retail ownership and manager. But still, perhaps there's some influence or pressure or opportunities that might be there, both with UT and with the retail parking area, to start thinking creatively about some ways to incorporate some of the housing ideas that both the prior 2 speakers had about how do we increase our density, what kind of creative things we can look at in terms of going forward. So it seems like we don't have any land left to build, but we really do, as long as we could get collaborators and partners who might be open to innovative uses of those space. So just a thought, but we do have land out here. It's just a matter of will to perhaps move some preordained purposes to some other housing purposes. So we've got, I think, some opportunities.
Commissioners, other suggestions? Yes, Rick.
I'm following Corky. There is still a big block of land at 51st and Bergman that's vacant, and so there's no plans for that. And
Right.
when I spoke earlier, if anyone's interested in tackling these parts that Michael and I have done for several years, please come forward. I'm sure we both would be happy to let someone else give it a shot. So I'm not assuming that I'm going to do this. I will, but I would really like for somebody to take a tackle it if they're interested, because you can see in the past reports what I've done. So if somebody's got better ideas, please step forward.
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, if we're raising issues with the council, I think one that stuck with me from this past year, my short time, was the issue of seniors on fixed incomes in particular, that them falling further and further behind. And so, and I was kind of told at the time that there's nothing to be done about that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it should be raised, and hopefully somebody can come up with a creative solution on that front.
I'm glad you brought that up, and we can also perhaps broaden it to, as the project gets closer and we're looking at seeing if we're meeting the guiding principles, is to look, because this was designed to be a diverse community, and we should start looking at seeing at what other parts of this diverse community aren't being fully served. And older Texans is one of them, and then look and see who else isn't being able to take full advantage of this wonderful community. So underserved populations, particularly older people, because none of us will be kids anymore, and eventually we're all gonna hang around and we're all gonna be in need of those services, some pretty soon. Any other suggestions on the content of the report, particularly our focus on, I mean, we know what we've done, but what we need to do. One other thing we might think about doing, particularly in this report and the next one, is actually, and we'll have to figure out how to word it, and so some thought needs to go into that. One is addressing transition issues directly, and I don't know if that means a separate transition section or we just work it into transition issues into the issues covered under the guiding principles, and also start to talk about lessons learned. I remember when I first joined the commission, the guy who was the chair at that time talked about maybe we should do kind of a report mid-project, halfway through, to see how we're doing. And I don't think it worked out exactly that way, but as we get closer to the end, we should probably start looking at what worked. And maybe we look at similar projects in other areas, like the Stapleton project in Denver. And I know that's much larger in terms of the amount of acreage they cover, but maybe we could start looking at what others have done to try to document in this report, and I'm sure that there may be other people with greater expertise, perhaps at the city, who are looking at other aspects of it, but from the commission standpoint, to start looking at what lessons that we learned, what worked, what didn't work, look back to what some of the original projections were for this development and some of the changes. And you might argue some of the changes that were made, including increasing density, worked out pretty well and helped address the challenges we were facing that we weren't facing back in 2000, but some things didn't work out as well as we'd hoped. And what are they? And what could future projects do to help avoid those issues? So that's a couple of other things we might want to add into this report, and also think about the one following that, which, if the project ends as intended, I don't know if that'll be the next one will be the last one, or there'll be one right after it. So other ideas or thoughts? Yes, Ken.
Michael, I like your idea about maybe a separate section on transition, and I'm happy to help work on that.
Your volunteered services are definitely going to be accepted.
Thank you.
Other suggestions? Okay, so the plan is, between now and the next month, is that we develop it won't be final, but a really good, hopefully well-written draft that could be circulated among the commissioners, and we could use the interim period for you to make suggestions about changes. And there's no pride of authorship here, so if you've got text, not just, I think we ought to add something there, but feel free to go ahead and type something into the keyboard, specific language that could be included that would help support the content that we've discussed in this report. And I think it'll make it more useful, not only to document what's happened, but make it more useful for our council members, because they've obviously got a lot of other things on their plate, but hopefully some of this information might be useful to them and the staff who are going to be reviewing it. Any other suggestions? All righty, well, we've got our assignments. Like I said, at next month's meeting, we want to have a draft, so we'll need everybody's input so that we can review it next month. And since we don't meet in July, we'll actually have to approve it at next month's meeting as a reminder. The next item on our agenda is the Mueller Commission residency requirements, and our esteemed vice chair is going to lead the discussion. I'll ask him to briefly recap, because we did talk about this back in, is it November? Late last year. So we've slept a little since then, but I'd like him to give you kind of a recap the discussion, the brief history, and I think hopefully everybody got to see, and I'm going to thank the staff for sending us copies of the, I think it was 2015 city ordinance that prescribed what the residency requirements are for membership on this commission. And so, Rick, if you can kind of give people a quick recap of how we got to this point and a reminder of what we discussed last month. And before he does it, I want to give everybody, should we decide, I thought we needed to have this discussion at this meeting, one, because the agenda wasn't as crazy as some of our meetings, and I thought we'd have the time to do it, but also, I felt we discussed it for a few months. Some of you have discussed it in one-on-one conversations, but I thought we either needed to fish or cut bait, either take some action or, put it to bed and leave it alone. And so if we decide that this is something we don't want to pursue, since we're talking about potentially a change in a council ordinance, this isn't something that the kind of recommendation we would normally make to council. So the next step, if we decide to pursue this, would be to create a small work group with a short timeline for coming back with specific actions or a specific request for council. So I want to give everybody a heads up. It's not like we're going to have this discussion, and if we say, yeah, that's a good idea, we're suddenly going to send off some, document or a letter or memo or something to council. There's another interim step in between if we decide to do it. So with that, Rick, do you want to go ahead and give everybody a recap and explain how in the world we got to this point?
I think it's been covered enough, but most of us probably have a decent idea. The commission was created, I think, in 2000. There was a prior group that was meeting. It was after the Processing Goals Task Force of the mid-90s. There was still a sort of a city group that met to talk about Mueller issues, but then this commission was formed, I believe it was 2000. And it was seven members, because that's the number of council members we had at the time. They were all appointed initially at large by all of the council members. Ultimately, around 2007, I think it changed, and each council member started making an individual appointment. And then when we went to the 10-1 council forum, I think it was Mueller residents, and of course there weren't any until 2007. So this was about 8 years later that I guess there was concern that from districts that are far-flung from Mueller, there might not be the knowledge or interest of what was going on in the community, and so I think it was Mueller Neighborhood Association, went directly to council with a list of neighborhoods that had been composed of the very ad hoc Mueller Neighborhoods Coalition that existed from, I think, the late 80s, and was just advocated both for moving aviation from here rather than expanding Mueller, and then for redeveloping the site. Thank you very much to Gerard for that. Yeah, we can get him to move the airplanes, but what are you going to do with the land afterwards? So he sort of got us going on that. Thank you again. Anyway, the Mueller Neighborhood Association took that list, and the council just adopted it somehow without our knowledge. I didn't have any knowledge of it. And so it's been that way then since 2000, I don't know the date somewhere.
2015.
Yeah, 2015. May 7th, 2015. I actually went back and had looked at the council's discussion on the tape. It's pretty interesting. There was a lot of discussion comparing this group to a contact team. And I think that there is some standing part of an order that when this commission goes away, that Miller can get a contact team. I don't know if it will automatically happen or if that would come to the neighborhood, but that's another discussion that needs to happen within Miller residents. But anyway, it really wasn't an issue, except that the list of neighborhoods was very loose. That some of those neighborhoods have been absorbed into planning areas since the neighborhood planning has happened. And it's kind of hard to find some of the neighborhoods, the 22 neighborhoods, I think it is on the list, on a map, or to know where they are. So there's a bit of that issue. And then we had our most recent appointee who wasn't in any of those neighborhoods and managed to get appointed, though it stirred up some issues. So that's kind of where we are today. It's like, I'm ready to get the, take a vote here tonight and say, do we want to recommend that the council just eliminate it? I kind of looked at creating other definitions of areas that Miller Commission members should come from, but nobody's come up with anything that I think is, I don't know, it doesn't really gel somehow. As this commission is getting closer to a close, it's going to be interesting to see how the last appointees fall out, because some of us are probably going to roll off here next year. Don't know that for sure, but there will be some changes. And so the last 2 years could be very interesting. And it might be that there are people who have interest and expertise from around the city that could contribute in those last couple of years. So, but if it doesn't happen, it seems that we have walked along this far without it being a huge issue. So I'm okay with either way. So do I need to make the motion that we?
Well, first, why don't we have a little bit of a discussion, because we talked about it. Rick's kind of giving you his rationale for it, and I'd like to hear feedback from the other commissioners on this before we take a vote. Yes, Dave. I think, and just I think it should be noted, Dave was active in the Miller Neighborhood Association. I don't know if it was at the same time this happened or a year before, a year after.
Yeah, I can't remember. Actually, Kathy looked it up, and it might have been a year before or a year after me, but I definitely was involved with it. And I don't, honestly, I can't remember all the details or even all the sort of rationale and argument, but, I'm not opposed to expanding, but I think there is, I don't think it's completely unreasonable to consider that people that are more close to the project might have more interest. The definitions of the neighborhoods, I totally agree. We used the list and then another council member added to the list, and then that's how it got expanded. But even still, how you define what a neighborhood is such a loose thing, and so, if we were to try to maintain some type of geographical thing, I think it would be much easier to just do some kind of radius from Aldrich Street and Simon or something, but, something along those lines of the middle of the neighborhood, and then just do some radius, if people wanted to continue that, but, I don't know if I don't know that I'm gonna stand here and try to come up with a, really passionate argument that we should maintain it. But again, I haven't looked back and thought about all the rationale at the time, but I think there was an idea that people that are closer to the project are gonna be more invested in it, so.
Yes, Rick.
So, yeah, just to follow up on that a little bit, and I don't know, Jason, do you live in your appointors district?
I do not.
And that's the thing, is that they can, members can be appointed from anywhere, and so it's probably more likely that someone who is at least aware and has an interest in Miller is going to be somewhere in the area, and they would go to a council member and ask for an appointment. So it's not like they get appointed they have to come from the districts. So.
Comment?
Yes, go
a
ahead.
comment.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was real involved with this during that time. You can't remember much about it, sort of like Dave. We've got 18 months until 2024. And in that 18 months, there's going to be council elections, and several of us, the likelihood of several of us being reappointed is not certain, as they never are, because we have retiring council members. And this is a real important time in the life of Miller, because we'll have a lot of closure about transition as we move. So I think we do have a special time ahead of us. I'm kind of like Dave. I mean, I'm not real hot about this one way or the other, but I do think people from the area might have a different look. I don't know, maybe that's just because I'm here and have been for a while. But what if we offered this? What if there was an exception made under the current nomenclature or the requirements of the ordinance, and just said that there's an opportunity for exceptions to be made here. Our appointees given special skills or interest, and let it stand at that. Because I don't want to disparage anybody who's on the current council, I don't mean that. But I think rather than redoing the whole thing, is just to give an exception. So if a council member has a special opportunity to nominate someone who may not be from the area, has special interest or special expertise, that would be okay. It would be noted as an exception. And just let it be handled like that, not really. There's a lot to go through for something that's going to not be perhaps even in business in 18 to 24 months.
Thoughts? Yes, Jason.
So, as I understand it, we're looking out for the city's interest here, right? And
That's
so,
correct.
so limiting it to just people who live here, I think, is too limiting. But I do see the value in having the majority of people on the commission from here. So I would definitely be in favor of saying, 6 of the spots or something should be specifically reserved. And I like the idea of the radius thing, or you're even more, 6, 7, whatever. But I think given the goal of the commission, that it should not be just limited to here. And I know that sounds self-serving, and I can't help where I live. I don't live here, but I definitely do see the interest and the value of having spent a little bit of time here with the commission, of having people that are intimately familiar with the details of, how this project came to be and the history and all that. I definitely see that as having a lot of value. But given the goal of the commission, limiting it to just people that live here seems too limiting in my opinion. But, and I'm fine with leaving it as is or changing it. I mean, we are, I guess we are 18 months out potentially from having this end. And so, I can see it both ways. Again, I'm not going to, get on a soapbox here, and, I'm willing to kind of go with the flow here, but that's kind of from where I sit, how I see it.
Commissioners, other thoughts? Yes, Rick.
Corky's idea is okay. I don't think it's bad. It's just that I think if you would have to amend the ordinance anyway to do that, to say, oh, well, we can let somebody else in too. So it's like, why not just drop it all? I'm going to look to our staff members if they know anything more about how all of this has to be processed. But I don't. It's either it's kind of like just leave it and let them do what they want to do, which apparently they can do, or to just drop it. Have them amend the ordinance so that that's not there. So that's my input.
And I, just as a point of clarification, and I think I'm explaining this correctly, you said I think the council always has can override its own ordinance, and they did so, and you became a very valuable person. I guess what Corky's idea would be is, instead of it having to be something special, that any council member would have the opportunity to say, you know, I know somebody, and it may be a constituent or maybe not, who's very talented and has an expertise that would actually serve well on that commission, and I'd like to appoint that person without having to go through an extra step. So I guess that would be the argument for it, if having it built in the ordinance itself, or a revised ordinance, having a built-in exception.
As if the council members, I think, look at the ordinance when they want to make an appointment.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, I think we just tell them, hey, can you drop it all, or leave it as it is, and let them do what they want to do.
Ken, you have a thought?
I guess I'm trying to understand, were we requested by council to have discussions around this?
It's all me.
It's, okay, and that's fine. So then my other question is, what do we really gain by taking, having this change made, even if proposed?
Yeah, really.
Because I think at this point, with 18 to 24 months, I think we're sort of reaching the end. And I don't mean to discount what you're bringing up, Rick, because I've always valued your input. You've always been a sound person, and but at the same time, I'm just like, what do we gain from this? And so that's my question. And then the other thing I'd like to try to throw out there, as you know, there were with Mueller Neighborhood Coalition, there was originally, I think, 8 to 12 neighborhoods that gathered around to basically look at this whole 711 acres. And within that, those neighborhoods, whether people agree or not, but I know I was there and I helped write it, we helped form the 6 values. And that is what, to me, is the foundation that this development was built around. And I think that there is value in reaching out to neighbors, whether they live next door, whether they live, 85 miles away. If you're a city of Austin resident, to me, you have a right.
Jason?
Well, I think the thing that Rick brought up that I think is especially problematic here is if Rick can't look at the list of neighborhoods and figure out where they are and what the boundaries are here, that seems to me to be if there's a significant problem here, that seems to be it, is it's not clear what we're even talking about. So if somebody's trying to abide by the regulation and literally can't find these things, that seems to be an issue.
Yes, Chris.
I don't know if this is here nor there or somewhere in the middle that could be beneficial to the future, but kind of back to everything that I'm hearing and to Dave's point about the radius, it seems to me like maybe nothing is the most effective move on a formality here. I do wonder though if this sort of like an amorphous radial effect, thinking about this as a regional hub, Miller is a regional hub, and there's, rather than a radius, there's sort of a weighted center. So for instance, over in Cherrywood French Place. Most of the time I'm going the other direction, but I loop back to Miller sometimes, versus there's a big window north and east and southeast that is probably coming for whether it's, human health, public open space, or basic necessities, or their employment, and that sort of thing, that perhaps we, in terms of this exercise informally, maybe that's the lens that we look through, which I would imagine aligns a lot more to the 8 to 12 neighborhoods as well. But as an outcome of this, even beyond the 18 to 24 months, I don't know if there's a way to work with City of Austin GIS experts or others to really kind of look at the next step of who does this serve moving into the next 15 to 20 years? Who does this neighborhood serve? And how does the city of Austin look at the Miller development to accomplish those goals kind of beyond the kind of medium near term?
Commissioners, other thoughts? I would like to make one other point. I think Corky got appointed to the commission just before I did. And at that time, we still had the old 6-member city council. So all of the council members were elected at large. But even then, most of them chose people who lived in this general area. They didn't have this requirement that you had to be in a particular neighborhood. But I would point out they did, even then, and one of the person that I sat next to my first year on the council actually didn't live in Austin, because they did have an exception there. And this person was I'm not going to mention the name, but this person was very bright, very knowledgeable about transportation issues. And I learned a lot just kind of listening to them. So I thought I'd make that point, that even before we were in this situation, it's mostly, for obvious reasons, the people who are going to be interested are going to be the people in this northeast Austin area anyway. So even without the requirement, I think that's, that as long as the council members weren't required to appoint somebody from their district, if that was the situation, then I think you'd have a real problem. Otherwise, I think the council members have responded by appointing people who are interested. So, any other thoughts? Go ahead, Rick.
Follow up a little. I'm partially doing this just sort of for historical perspective. If someone came back and looked at the commission much, and it's like, well, they had to come from these neighborhoods, and where are those neighborhoods, kind of thing. I don't know that that's going to make a huge amount of difference. I don't know that it's worth going through the effort to try to create and define a new area from which we should draw our membership. When we had this 6 council and mayor, part of the reason we got the 10-1 council form of government was because when they were all elected at large, most of them lived very central. There was not representation from the outer parts of the city. So as new council members come on that are in some of those outer parts of the city, and if they do look at it, it's like, what is this? Where are these people? So that's, like I said, I feel like it's sort of drop it or leave it. I think those are sort of our options. That's just me, so I would make a motion to.
But before we do that, there was one
Okay.
other person that had a comment, and I think we have somebody signed up for
Yeah,
testimony.
Gerard signed up to speak on this item, and unfortunately, I missed that Gerard had actually wanted to also speak on the work session, but Gerard indicated that his comments would be comparable on both.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
Rick, I just wanted you to define, when you say drop it, what does that actually mean?
Drop the geographic requirement for membership. Or maybe I'm saying, well, drop it yet. Okay, so let's just drop the subject and move on.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Or leave,
Commissioners, anybody else have any thoughts? All right, well, let's hear from our, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Go right ahead.
I'll just reiterate my ambivalence. I'm not super excited either direction. I did find the email, and I was reading through it again and looking for some of the rationale, and contact teams was definitely a part of it, and also just the idea that this commission, one of our main responsibilities is recommending changes, potentially to the plan or making suggestions there. And the thought was at the time that if you can imagine the commission could be assembled entirely of people who don't live in the area, just as a, guardrail to guardrail kind of analysis. And the idea that those folks may not be as connected to the community where they're getting feedback on the things that they're, suggesting to make changes on. So And I look back and actually have a map. I actually mapped out all the neighborhoods myself, apparently. Not to say that's any official document, but I probably went back to, I think the contact teams have maps, I think, that just define neighborhood boundaries, and I'm guessing that's how I ended up. But I was so confused by it, I think, at the time myself, that I actually had to draw a map out, so.
Can I follow up? And now that you distracted me, what was it you were going to say? Never mind then.
If I remember it all.
Anyone else have any comments? All right. Well, we do have public oh, go ahead, Mark.
Anyone crazy enough to want to be on this commission should just be on it.
Any other comments or thoughts? Okay. Well, now we'll hear from our fellow Austinites. Okay, go ahead.
Dave's comment. So actually, the discussion of contact team, and that was a huge part of the discussion on changing the ordinance to define these geographic or these neighborhoods to be membership. So the mayor was very adamant about contact teams, and if this is the city of Austin, you know, that they have the bylaws. You can be a member of a contact team if you own a business in the neighborhood. You don't have to reside there, or if you own property in the neighborhood, you don't have to reside there. So that's what you get from a contact team. So.
All right, commissioners, any other comments? All right. Well, we'll now hear some public testimony in this from Gerard Kinney, and one of the early community leaders that helped put this commission and help get this the idea for this project off the ground.
Thank you. I had actually signed up also for the previous items. I just want to basically say something about that. With respect to the work session, one of the things I think Corky mentioned this whole looking at density, maybe at the retail center area that was laid out, as many of you know, with that additional density in mind. One of the things you might do, and also looking at the subject of what went right and what went wrong, and learning from mistakes, as well as from successes. I think that the retail center represents a very good example of how to plan for the future, the long-term future. We haven't really realized it yet, but I think it will happen. On the other hand, I think the market center is, from a site planning point of view, I don't really want to use the terms I think of when I think of it. I mean, I just think it's, a comparison of those two would be very useful to the city. And then maybe that should be something that would be in your report. Also, and transitioning into this whole subject about residency, one of the basic principles of Mueller from the very beginning was that it not be a gated community and that it be completely transparent all the way around. I think it's whether it's a contact team or this group or whatever group continues past this group, there should always be some mechanism by which people that are adjacent are involved, actually at the table. And so whether that means that you, rather than think of it as neighborhood, maybe think of it as the streets, and there just needs to be somebody in those geographical areas involved, because they're the ones that created Mueller in the first place. So I think Ken was making that point as well. So I think that somehow there needs to be a mechanism. I'm not telling you what the mechanism should be, but there should be a mechanism to preserve that connectivity with the surrounding neighborhoods. Thank you. And
Gerard, did you have any other testimony? Because we counted that as two different testimonies. If you wanted to testify further on the other topic, you had that opportunity as well. Since you're
I
already
know
signed
that.
up.
No, I think I covered everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners. Is there an interest in taking a formal vote on this, or putting this to bed and simply not taking any action? I think I kind of outlined what, if you decide to proceed, what the next step would be a work group to come up with some specific request. And if not, then I assume this is probably the last time we'll probably discuss this the next couple of years. I can't predict what future commissioners might do the next couple of years. So I'm just going to kind of look for thoughts, response. Is there an interest in taking a vote on this?
Wouldn't the procedure be that someone make a motion and then if it fails to get a second, it's over with?
Well, we could do that, of course, and normally the votes are pretty unanimous, and I was going to give an opportunity I was trying to gauge the interest in seeing if people want to take a vote or not, and we could vote it up or down, but anybody? Well, okay, Rick, if you've got a motion, go ahead.
Okay, so I move that we send an advisory missive. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop and allow Jill to tell me something.
My apologies, commissioners. I probably should have spoken up earlier. So I think as we've indicated, this is an unusual item, right, coming before the clerk's office in terms of what the proper procedures or follow-ups would be. And Matthew Schmidt and I have been in contact with the clerk's office just to try to determine what the options are. You know, there's a couple of different paths potentially moving forward, and the clerk's office, should it be the will of the commission to recommend making some modifications, they're working with a city attorney, you know, from our law department to try to figure out what those options may be. And so at this point, I think, and we let the clerk's office know that this item was on the agenda this evening and that y'all would be having this discussion, trying to determine whether or not there is support for this item. I don't think we have right now exactly what the correct or what the precise mechanism would be. And so I think the motion would be more so whether or not there is support to continue to explore options. And as Michael said, perhaps have a smaller working group, work closely with city staff, you know, consulting with the clerk's office to determine what the options would be. Whether it's a change to the bylaws, making a recommendation to council to change the ordinance, I think there's a couple different paths that could be considered.
Everybody clear on that? Rick, do you want to make a motion?
Well, I'm not clear on it because how did the initial ordinance get passed anyway? It's like, so we would send something to council and they figure it out. Would that not be the procedure?
I mean, it is always your prerogative to make a recommendation to council. Like I said, we were just working through with the clerk's office, boards and commission staff, sort of what the options would be in terms of what that recommendation would look like.
Okay, so again, all we can do is, you know, we advise the council. So do we advise them to say you should probably drop the residency requirement from for membership in this commission, and kind of leave it at that? That's kind of what I was going to move, and so then they get to figure it out how they want to do it. So that's my motion. I move that we send an advisory missive of some sort to the council saying to drop the residency requirement for membership on the Robert Mueller Municipal Airport Plan Implementation Advisory Commission. Is there a second?
Is there a second?
Okay, we're done. Yay.
Well, no, I'll go ahead and second, because we need to go ahead and take a vote on it. So I'm going to go ahead and second it, so we take a formal vote. We spent some time, we need to make a decision. So I'll second the motion. So everybody's clear on what we're voting on. Any questions? Yes, Ken.
So, Rick, I get where you're going, and I understand your point that we're here to help advise, but I think at this point, hearing information from the city, I mean, it sounds pretty complicated. And I almost feel like maybe we're jumping the gun. So should we, maybe the amendment should be that they do the research, come back to us, and then we make a recommendation? I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be difficult, but I am just sort of trying to balance this all out, because at this point, I don't know if I feel comfortable making a recommendation to council to do that.
Just for clarification, I think for this particular issue, because it's so unique just to this commission, I think the onus would be on this commission. If we're asking asking the council to make some change, even if there's some research that has to be done, I think we're the ones that, we would have to recommend something to them. We couldn't say, you guys ought to look at it, because I think their response might be, well, you're the ones that are supposed to be the, not experts, but you're the ones dealing with this issue. If you want to make a request, you should request something, and then we'll take it under advisement as whether we'll approve a change. But I think we would be the ones that would have to take the initiative to recommend something to them.
Okay, so is the recommendation for a vote to create a small committee to review this?
No, his motion is to recommend that they drop the residency requirement. The next steps, how you would go about doing that, would be determined by the council or the city staff by whatever procedure, because this isn't, since we're talking about a change to a city ordinance, this goes beyond the normal kind of resolutions or proposals that we send to council or have done so in the past. So that makes it a little bit of an odd duck. That's why we have to, if we want to recommend something, we have to say what it is, and then they'll tell us, well, this is, if you want to do that, if we agree to do it, this is how it has to be done. So, other questions? Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Opposed.
1, 2,
Opposed.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm going to abstain, I think.
Okay, if I counted correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 4 no votes, 3 yes votes, and 1 abstain. So the motion is not agreed to, and we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you for the discussion. I think it is good to kind of, no, it is good to talk about these issues, and it's something that gets to the core of how this commission was formed and how it operates, and so.
Excuse me, Michael, before we go on, I just, for the records, can I just, by show of hands, can we get the yes votes again?
There were 3 yes votes. Kravaniak, Lukey, Jones.
Say that again? So that was 4 votes.
No, there were 4 no's.
The yes votes were yes.
There were 3 yeses and 1 abstain.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, for just clarification, Chris, you were a yes?
I was a yes.
Commissioner Jackson, I'm sorry. Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
So,
What?
yes, if we could just raise a hand for all that voted yes on this.
You were yes?
motion.
Okay. Let's do this one more time. Yes.
Please just raise your hand high
Yeah.
for staff.
Wait, there's a new.
No, I think there was an incorrect count at the original.
Yeah.
Different count. Oh.
So we have 4 yeses.
And no votes?
For those that have no, please raise your hand.
1, 2,
And
3,
So we have 3 no's.
and 1 abstain. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I missed one person. That was kind of key. The motion is approved. We'll create a small work group, and we will report back next month, and that'll provide time to get feedback from the city staff about the exact procedure. Okay. The next item on our agenda, which should be a little simpler, commissioners, have you had an opportunity to look at the minutes from our April 12th meeting? And are there any changes or corrections that need to be made to those minutes? If there are none, is there a motion to approve the April 12th meeting minutes as written? There's been a motion by Commissioner Hayes. Is there a second? Hyde, sorry, anyway. It's a beard, you look like Rutherford B. Hayes. There's a second?
Well, I did call you dear leader last time.
Yes, that's
You
true.
can throw some shade my way. That's all.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further questions? Those in favor of approving the minutes as written, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All righty, agenda items, obviously we'll be finalizing the annual report next month. Are there any other issues or topics that we might want to explore at our June meeting? Reminder, we won't meet in July, so that'll be our last opportunity to cover any topics until the end of the summer. And
I have a
then
comment.
yes, go ahead, Corky.
I want to not be sure not to lose the comment that Chris made at the end of the discussion on residency. I think that his approach to thinking about the future is real important to include in the annual report. First, we talk about the future and how we begin to think about who uses and who's impacted by Miller. I mean, I can't quite put it all back together again, but his thoughtfulness about that I thought was really good and had implications for our annual report.
I agree with you, and that's on the list of topics. I like the way you worded that. So
Yeah, thank you.
Put that in the report. Any other topics we should definitely cover in June? Yes, Jill.
Excuse me, thank you. We have been working on coordinating still, I think we talked about this previously, more information about the building that we're in, and we're hoping that the timing will work out for Austin Energy staff to be able to present more information, not just about this building, but perhaps also about other sustainability features in Miller as well. So we're still working on coordinating that, but I just wanted to put that out there as a potential future agenda item.
Thank you. Any other topics? All right. Is there any objection to adjourning the meeting? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. It's another interesting meeting. Thank you for your participation.